first started my career in design, I was all about perfection. I was all about finding the perfect methods, the perfect approach, the perfect process to get to the perfect design. But then when I entered career design roles, and I got my first job in design, reality hit quite fast. I had deadlines, we had reduced budgets, we had difficult circumstances that we had to work within. And I quite quickly found that reaching for perfection meant that I didn't get anywhere at all. And that's where I developed a good enough mindset as a way to work within these challenging circumstances. And that's what I'm going to tell you about today. Firstly, I'll introduce who I am. So I'm Lucille Harvey, and I'm head of UX or user experience at Triad. We design digital products, mostly for the UK government. My role in that is I understand the people element in designing things. And I then try and design something that is as user-friendly and as intuitive as possible. But in that, it is quite tricky. So that's where I've developed the good enough mindset, and I'm going to talk you through that today. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we go towards this action, why we push towards that, and how we always try and do more things than we can do. But first, I'm going to start with a little thought experiment. So I want you to imagine that you've been asked to design the wings on this ladybird, and you've been asked to make them symmetrical. I want you to have a bit of a think about what you do in this scenario. How would you make these wings symmetrical? You've got a couple of choices in that. You could add to the wings on the left-hand side, you could add some dots there, or you could remove some dots on the other side. Most people, when faced with this sort of problem, they tend to add in their solution. They will go with these little way that involves doing walls. So adding to the left-hand side. So there's an American scientist called Guy Plus, and he's done loads of experiments with lots of different people in lots of different settings. And he's found that over and over again, when there's a problem, people tend to add. People tend to overcomplicate and do more than we can do. I'll give you an example now. Think about watching TV. Sounds quite simple, right? It used to be very simple. When I was younger, you had a TV, you had a handful of channels on that TV, and that was it. And that is me when I was younger, and that was the TV that we had. But over the years, human society has added more and more and more to this idea of watching TV. So now that it's actually quite complicated if you think about it. Because it's not just watching TV. You've got so many different platforms that you can watch TV on. You can watch it on an actual TV, watch it on your phone, watch it on your tablets. There's also logins and subscriptions and user profiles. Watching TV has actually become quite complicated, but is it actually any better than when we had one TV with just a few channels? So this is a bit of a problem in that we instinctually try and do more. We instinctually overcomplicate, and we are programmed to do so. But sometimes we can't. We don't have the time, we don't have the space, we have deadlines. We can't always do more. There's been a few people over the years who thought about this and thought about what can we do if we don't have as much time as we want to. Some of these you may be familiar with. First one, work smarter, not harder. I'm sure many of you have heard of that phrase. But when I hear that, I think, okay, so I've got to think more, I've got to be more creative. It's still more to do less. Another quote here, that perfection is only achieved not when there's nothing to add, when there's nothing left, there's nothing else to take away. But still with that, you've got to get to the point where you have more to get to less. What if we can't do more? What if we don't have that time? What do we do in that scenario? So it was through my work and through understanding this human instinct to do more that I adopted a good enough mindset, and I adopted an approach for these situations where we had to do less. The good enough mindset is a way to remind yourself to do less. It's a way to help you focus on what truly matters, focus on your endless goals. It also helps you become comfortable in doing less when you absolutely need to. The first part of this is being aware of the limits. It sounds quite obvious when you think about it, but I think you'd be surprised how many people forget this. When you're in a challenging scenario, maybe you've got deadlines, you've got exams coming up, you need to know exactly what are the boundaries within which you are working. So this could be your own limits. Maybe when you've got a certain amount of time, maybe you've got a lot of stuff on your mind, so you don't only have so much brain space. Maybe it's external limits as well. Maybe it's other people's time or other people's availability that you need to be aware of. I'll give you an example of this. Bear with me, but these are these examples. Imagine that you had to buy some tins of beans, and you need to know how many tins of beans that you can buy. You look at your cupboard space, and you've got space for 4 tins of beans. But then you have a look and you see how much money you've got. You've only got enough money for then 3 tins of beans. Why would you buy 5 tins of beans when you've worked out that you can only buy 3? That's what I mean about being aware of those limits. Is that you can logically work out what you can fit within that lesser amount of time. The next part of the good enough mindset is making sure that everyone is on the same page. Everything that we do, whether it's school, work, life, hobbies, it involves other people. And again, this sounds like it's an obvious thing, but you'd be surprised how many people forget it. When we're working with other people and we've got deadlines or we've got limits on what we can do, we need to make sure that everyone's on the same page in that, so we can all make that decision collaboratively together. So I'll go back to the example about beans. You've worked out that you can buy 3 tins of beans. Suddenly your friend comes along and wants to buy 5 tins of beans. They don't know that you've only got space for 4 and only got money for 3 tins of beans. So you need to make sure that you're all on the same page in terms of how many tins of beans you can buy. The next part of the good enough mindset is working out what's good enough for now. What's good enough in now may not be good enough in the future. What I find with this part of it is it makes me feel more comfortable about working out how I can do a little bit less. In that I know that I can still do more in the future, but I just need to work out what's good enough for now. So, for example, imagine you're learning a new skill. You're learning how to code, for example. The standard that you set for your first coding project will be different to the standard that you set yourself for your 10th coding project. What's good enough for your first project will definitely not be good enough for your 10th project. It's important to focus on what will help us progress, what will help us move forward, as opposed to chasing perfection. Perfection can often get in the way of progress. The last part to the good enough mindset is speaking up when things aren't working. Because we live in the real world, unexpected things happen, things change. We need to make sure that we are doing doing what we need to and doing the right thing, not just because we started to initially. I'll give you an example of this. So I set myself a goal a few months ago. I wanted to improve my running. I wanted to be able to run a 10K eventually. And I thought that was my goal, to run a 10K by about springtime this year. However, since I set that goal, I've had lots of different things happen. So I've been doing more speaking, like events like this, and I've been doing more, I had to fix a load of things around the house. So I've had to change my goal, and I've had to adapt. We need to make sure that we're only doing things because we really should do. So I'm going to give you an example of the good enough mindset in action, in a project that I've worked on with the Department for Transport. And we wanted to build the best system ever, but we had some really great deadlines that we were working towards, and we realised that we just couldn't do everything that we wanted to. Part of the system that we ended up building involved the users having to put in a really complicated Excel-style formula into the system to get it to do what they wanted it to do. So think it was ifs and thens and brackets and a very complicated thing. It wasn't intuitive, it wasn't user-friendly, but it was successful. It helped us get to where we needed to go and helped us deliver for our clients. It was good enough. So I'm going to finish out on a quote from the scientist that I mentioned at the beginning, Nigel Kloss, and his book, Subtraction. That it's easy to mistake doing less for loss, but less isn't loss. Sometimes less is just less, and sometimes less is good enough. The good enough mindset isn't something that you should be using all the time. Sometimes we need to go above and beyond, because that's where real creativity happens and real innovation happens. But sometimes we are in challenging situations where we can't go above and beyond, and we need to work out what's good enough. And you can shape tomorrow and shape the future with less. So next time you are facing a challenge, you've got deadlines, or you don't have the time to do absolutely everything, I want you to think to yourself, what is good enough? What is good enough for success? And remember that sometimes good enough is good enough. Thank you very much.